Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Paddock Pass podcast. This show comes to you thanks to the support of Renthal. If you have a street bike, then go to renthal.com, select the Fit My Bike option, and you'll be able to find a range of cool and high-grade accessories for your street bike. Renthal aren't only off-road masters. They also will be able to offer plenty of products for your machine on the road. My name's Adam Wheeler, and I'm joined for this preview of the French Grand Prix at Le Mans by David Emmett, who will not be on the ground in France after his glorious comeback in Jerez, plus the test, as well as doing a lap of the track and coming back very sweaty on a very hot testing day on Monday post-Spanish GP. And Neil Morrison as well, who was... Neil, maybe you can try and summarise some of your adventures in trying to get home during the Spanish power cut.
Yeah, I don't know what was more dramatic, the Grand Prix or the trip home itself. The trip home took about 4 days in total. Just as I was about to board my train on the Monday post-race in Sevilla, the electricity went off. And that was probably a blessing in disguise, actually, that we weren't already on the train, because I heard stories of poor people getting stuck somewhere in the line between Sevilla and Madrid in ridiculous 25, 26-degree heat with no water, having to be rescued.
And it's the middle of nowhere as well, isn't it? Because I've been on that line, and it literally is the middle of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah, desert. So, we had to sit outside the station for about 6 hours with no internet, no news of what was going on, what was happening. The last thing I read was there was a cyber attack happening. So I was assuming that everything was going to be upside down and there was going to be a new world order by the time the internet was reestablished. But that was actually quite fun, not having internet for 6 hours, because I got to read your book ad. And then it was a lot less fun when we decided to go and try and find a hotel without any internet. And you realize how effing hard it is to try and do practical things without the internet these days, with no access to maps or booking.com.
Yeah, can I just because I got all nostalgic when you were saying about that, because for my motorbike holidays with my wife, because my wife had this amazing ability of so we'd sort of like ride around for a little bit and then we'd end up somewhere and think, you know what, we need to find somewhere to stay, and then we'd sort of ride around, and Roshi would point at she'd point at a hotel and say there, and walk in and say, have you got any rooms? And they'd say yes, and it would be fantastic. She had sort of like this natural nose for lovely, charming hotels. So yeah, it gave me warm feelings, even though I was actually driving across a darkened sort of a darkened Andalusia, arriving in Fuengirola at 11:30 or something, with half of the town, the half that I wasn't staying in, fully lit up, and then sort of I get to the bit where my hotel is and it's completely blackout. So it was all good, clean fun.
Oh, prior to that, Dave, you and I submerged in the MotoGP bubble. I mean, we lost power in Jerez for 5 minutes, but then everything kind of went on, and life was merry and normal. Yeah,
well, I mean, that was one of the oddest things about it, that we were sort of like getting all this stuff coming through, but it just seemed almost surreal to us, because we were sort of, after a couple of minutes, the generators kicked in and they were away. They didn't even stop the on-track action, because the emergency power supply was so good at Jerez that it just came on sort of like immediately. The generators kicked in immediately. I don't think any of the panels lost power. Race direction didn't lose any power. It was just, sort of like the 3 or 4 minutes in the media center.
Yeah, well, that was Jerez. We're going to talk about Le Mans. We also did a quick paddock note show for people who follow us on Patreon. You'll be able to get a summary of what we saw at the test. Dave was down on all fours, everyone. So, it's well worth listening to that podcast to see what he spotted in the pit lane. But firstly,
you
thanks.
Make me sound like a pervert. Which, fair.
Well, there is that blacklist across Europe, Dave. Let's try not to mention it too early in the pod. But first of all, listen, thanks to the kind people at Silverstone, we had 3 pairs of general admission tickets to give away for the British Grand Prix. We'll be announcing the winners a little bit later in the show. But if you are thinking about the British Grand Prix at Silverstone in a couple of weeks, then it's £120 for a 3-day ticket. So if you want to go into the track at some point across Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then it's only 120 quid. It's £100 if you want to go on Sunday. So that's great value. If you want to take the kids, then under 11s are free. Under 16s have a 50% discount if you book through the website. Silverstone are putting on concerts each night. Mr. Jam, Hardfire, and Jake Bugg are the performing artists. There's also the usual fan interaction areas and plenty of grandstand option tickets as well. And of course, hospitality. But first of all, Le Mans. Neil, is this the point in the podcast where I hand over to you so you can show off some of your fancy French, or should we just talk about the racing?
Yeah, what's French again for massive thunderstorm and soaking wet shoes? I don't think I've become that advanced yet, to be honest. But yes, I guess it's just you and me that can talk about this section, because Dave actually has no experience of Le Mans in the last 14 or 15 years.
That's not true. I have been there a couple of times, but I tried to avoid it if at all possible.
But yeah, we're going to one of the rowdiest atmospheres in the calendar. Maybe not a classic track for vintage racing, although we have had some really exciting racing in the last couple of years, and a place where the weather obviously is probably one of the more prominent factors of anywhere we go. I think of the 23 MotoGP races in the four-stroke era that we've had at Le Mans, 11 have been either wet or have had rain falling during them. So yeah, something to always keep your eye on.
That's genuinely surprising. I would never have guessed that. I mean, like, you sort of like think there would be occasional sort of spots of rain and stuff, but
it's northern France, Dave.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it's sort of, you could say the same about Silverstone or Assen, but Assen generally is pretty decent weather.
Well, it's a dice roll, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
But even if it's not raining, the temperatures can be pretty low. I mean, Le Mans is always the first kind of anomaly on the calendar, it feels like, in terms of the climate. But, I mean, two things for me. Le Mans, I think, set the attendance record. Was it the year before last? I mean, we've spoken about this many times before, but the way that Claude Michy, the promoter, the organizer, the head of the French Grand Prix, puts this event together is quite remarkable in terms of the logistics, the pricing, the way that the whole event is stitched together. I mean, it is a shining example, if you like, of how to drive or get public to an event. I think the thirst for motorsport and motorcycling in general is pretty kind of rabid in this area of France, especially from going to MXGP's in the region as well. Ernay is just, a few kilometers away to the east of Le Mans. That had like big crowds. And the second thing as well, I don't know what your opinion, guys, but I think the fantastic turn one at Le Mans going into that very tricky chicane, which always seems to be a problem spot, but then also an exciting place for either incident or overtaking. I think it's one of the most exciting areas on a racetrack in the MotoGP calendar. I mean, if you think of other sort of problem areas or also exciting overtaking spots, then say turn one at Sachsenring. I mean, maybe even the old kind of approach to what turn 2, 3 at Red Bull Ring. I just feel that section of Le Mans has a lot of history. I mean, you can go back and see Grand Prix from the 1980s, and it's still essentially sort of the same, even though the trajectory of it has been tightened up in recent years on that approach down to the sort of the Dunlop Bridge. But I just think it's a fantastic place to watch trackside, but also just to keep an eye on as the race goes on.
I think it's I actually do really like the layout. And also, it's one of those tracks where you don't really, just watching on TV, you don't get a sense of what the elevation change. There isn't a lot of elevation change, but it does play an important factor. When you're going up through to turn one, you are going up. It is sort of like a slight rise, and then you get up to turn 3 when you're coming back down, and you're rolling down the hill. So it's not just that it's a long left-hander; it's also that you're sort of like dipping down the hill towards turn 5. It's just. Yeah, I really like it. There's so many things to actually love about Le Mans, like there is so much happening. The fact that you can stay in the centre of town and get a tram in that will take you almost to the door of the circuit. It's not far from Paris, which is why I think they get so many crowds. There is loads of history. There's the museum there as well, which I've been told is spectacular. You can sort of partially drive around the 24-hour car course if that's your bag. As long as you're, but I mean, yeah, it does turn into Quentin Tarantino's After Dark. After Dark.
Dusk till dawn.
Dusk till dawn. That's right. Dusk till dawn. Yeah. As soon as the sun goes down and the beer starts to hit, then it gets a slightly less friendly place.
Yeah, we have a chance with our passes to go and view on the inside of Turn 1, just at the exit of pit lane, and it's a pretty spectacular place. I'm always reminded of the sort of old videos of the 500s in the 1980s, where essentially Turn 1 was just one long right-hander up the hill, and then they dropped down under the Dunlop Bridge into what is now Turn 5. That was just like a sort of 180-degree hairpin. So you had this ludicrously fast Turn 1 right-hander with the barriers ridiculously close to the side of the track. It was a pretty scary place. By today's standard, it's not quite on that level, but it is still a really cool place to go and watch. And yeah, the track as a whole is okay. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite GPs of the year, but for atmosphere's sake, and when there is a chance of a French rider doing very well, we haven't really had that in the last 2 or 3 years. But when there is that chance, then the atmosphere is kind of kicked up a notch. And I think with what we've seen from both Quartararo and Zarco so far this year, I think there is, genuine reason for optimism for the French fans.
Why is it not one of your favourite GPs?
I mean, it's maybe just not one of the most. Le Mans is perfectly nice as a town, but it's not. It's not Cowes on Phillip Island, or it's not. Next to a little village next to Mugello. It doesn't quite have that inspiring beauty, but it's cool. It's fine. It's a nice place. And as I said before, it's usually raining, which brings the mood down somewhat.
Well, the good news is it's not going to rain.
Well, the long-term forecast is pretty good. It seems we're going to be in for some sunshine and sort of temperatures in the 20 degrees. It seems like Northern Europe is having a bit of a positive patch of weather, it seems. Certainly speaking to relatives in the UK at the moment. Hopefully it will stretch on past the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it's lovely here.
Okay. In the Netherlands, there we go. Stamp it. But kind of what Dave was saying earlier, I just love the whole motorsport history theming or feeling around Le Mans. I mean, again, as Dave mentioned, to get into the track through sort of now into what is staff parking instead of P1, you actually have to go down part of the Mulsanne Strait. So it's hard not to sort of, conjure up images of sort of 1960s, 70s, old sports cars, Steve McQueen, Le Mans, that kind of stuff.
You're just imagining yourself being Steve McQueen, aren't you? You've got your goggles on, you've got your helmet on, you've got the whole thing going.
Oh, the king of cool, Dave. I couldn't even get 0.1% of anything to do with that. But anyway, yeah, there's still, for me, there is that feeling around Le Mans of having that. And I think the crowd just adds to it because I think people who are fan of motorsports have the same sort of vibe. You're there for an event of consequence. And so, again, as Neil pointed out, I think the fact that, Johann Zarco has been doing pretty well for HRC, and also Fabio Quartararo getting on the podium. I mean, Claude Michy, if he hasn't already sold out Le Mans, must have been rubbing his hands watching Fabio have that result in Jerez. But it sort of seems to be all teed up for a pretty decent weekend for the French.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is like that grandstand, because it is really big, it's absolutely huge, and they do pack it out. That is the loudest place. That is the loudest pit lane I ever worked. When I was doing Eurosport, it was so loud. I think Austria is quite loud as well, but it's just not the same. Barcelona's pretty loud, but honestly, there you couldn't hear yourself think. It wasn't just the bikes. The bikes sort of the sound of the bikes sort of echoed around all of that infrastructure, but just the crowd. The crowd was so intense. It really was quite a thing.
was partly down to that sort of horrible metal monolith of a grandstand. I mean, like you said, you can't even have a conversation out the back of it when the bikes are going round. The sound just echoes and reverberates everywhere. It's in terms of working conditions, it's quite archaic. It's a little bit sort of a bit of a throwback, but then we can't favor the event for its history and then condemn it at the same time. That would be a bit churlish, I think. But Neil, just a quick mention on the layout, because I mean, you have La Chapelle, of course, I think is that fantastic downhill right-hander after the Dunlop Bridge. Memorably, we saw a multi-Moto3 crash there some years ago. And while something like Garage Vert, that double right-hander, feels a bit sort of artificial. And then I think, is it Garage Blur as well? Sort of, the very sort of intricate, complicated end of the lap. There are some other sort of fast-paced, sort of natural flowing bits, and you're going to be on Moto E commentary duties for the first time in 2025 this weekend. So I guess it's you're going to have to swiftly get your head around where the riders are going on track and work out sort of the little intricacies of passing opportunities and whatever else.
Yeah. Can you hear the excitement in my voice? The Moto E World Championship is back again for the seventh time this year. So yeah, excited for that. The track is. I mean, it's all about finding optimal braking settings, isn't it? Because there are so many heavy braking zones on the track. Lots and lots of overtaking opportunities, which I think can open up some excitement, especially when a rider's coming through from a bit further back with superior pace than the bikes ahead. And it can be a little bit there can be a little bit of commotion in the early laps if no one is sort of breaking clear. We saw that in 2023 with Bagnaia and Maverick coming together at the end of the lap. So as you say, there's a couple of faster corners like turn 1 and like down in towards turn 5 where it is a bit more flowing. So it's a pretty good test overall for both rider and machine.
Dave, we've had some pretty good insight into the transformation that HRC are going through in 2025 recently. I mean, Neil had some great interviews. And we've got another one with Harry Lloyd because, Honda showed off their fancy new hospitality for the first time in Jerez. They'll be parking up again in France. So we're going to play that in a minute. But based on what we've seen so far and the demands of Le Mans as a circuit, as we're talking about, who would you think, who would you put more money on for a better result this weekend? Johann Zarco or Fabio Quartararo?
That's a really good question, because the other thing is Le Mans was resurfaced not too long ago. I mean, I think maybe 2-3 years ago. So the track still has reasonable grip. The Yamaha's made a big step and is going to be good through the flowing bits. The Honda is going to lose out a little bit on the top speed, and especially out of that last corner. That's going to be difficult for him. But there is lots of stop and go. There's lots of stuff where you're really riding the hard end, the front end really hard through those hairpins, through Garage Vert, the double right. That's the sort of place where you ask a lot from the front end and where the Honda really delivers. So I would definitely. Well, I mean, I expect both of them to be sort of pretty close to the front, but you'd have to, well, put it this way. I wouldn't rule out a Johann Zarco podium, but I wouldn't put any money on him.
Yeah, I think after what Fabio did in Jerez, you are maybe looking at him as a possible podium contender. You mentioned about the sort of demands on the braking zones. I mean, Fabio is renowned in that area and is able to, I think in Austin we saw he was able to just make the difference, holding on to a lot of satellite Ducatis just by his braking superiority. He's not had the best record at Le Mans. He was on the podium in 21. He's never won a race at his home Grand Prix. But you look at the last couple of seasons, even when Yamaha was properly in the doldrums, he was kind of competitive here. I mean, he was running as high as 6th in last year's race after a really tricky start before crashing out. And I think with the Yamaha in the state that it was last year, that was, as good as saying that he was in the podium running or maybe even battling for victory. I fully expect him to kind of take a bit of a step up. And he was saying in Jerez, he was trying his very, very hardest, wasn't he, to play down expectations for this weekend. But it wasn't really succeeding so well.
And the other, I mean, that's right. There was sort of like, he was trying to say, no, don't get too excited about it all. And you could see there was a little twinkle in his eye going, nah.
Yeah.
We'll have a go.
Exactly. I mean, it could be an interesting race, generally speaking. I mean, you are inclined to believe that it's going to be absolute manna sent from heaven for Marc Marquez, just because of the...
If he could stop himself crashing out.
If he can control himself on the Sunday. He hasn't won a race since 2019 in Le Mans, but you could argue that in each of the last two Sunday Grand Prix that we've had here, he's been the kind of the star. He was fighting on a really, really crap Honda in 23 with Jorge Martin for second place for the majority of the race until he crashed, I think maybe in the last lap. Last year came through from 13th on the grid to finish second. Was basically with Martin and Bagnaia in the last lap. And passed obviously Bagnaia with just a couple of corners to go. So, I mean, I think this should be a cakewalk for him. But then we've I sort of thought that might be the case in Jerez, and obviously that didn't quite come to pass. So you're never sure. The only thing I would say though is that Bagnaia, this has not really been a great place for him in recent years.
No, it hasn't been a great place for him. The other one is Fabio Di Giannantonio. I rewatched last night. I rewatched the sprint and the main race, and Digi had a pretty good run last year. I think again the track sort of suits him, and he's in pretty good form. You have to think that he's going to be there. Alex Marquez, I mean, basically the lesson of Alex Marquez is in 2025, forget about anything Alex Marquez has ever done previously and just include him in sort of someone who's up there in with a chance with
that different guy. He's not Alex Marquez.
Genuinely, what is most impressive about Alex Marquez this year is his consistency. He's fast all the time, everywhere. So yeah, that you have to say that he's going to be there.
But didn't he take Dave? Didn't he take his best result on Repsol Honda at Le Mans, or was it one of his finer performances? Yeah.
So he was second in his first year.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was his first. It was his first MotoGP podium, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So yeah, you'd have to think that he's going to be there. The KTM's. What do we think about the KTM's? They did a lot of work at the Jerez test. Working on this vibration issue and sort of trying to piece lots of bits together. Brad Binder said that he got a little bit of the edge grip that he was missing, which is going to be useful through some of those sort of faster corners. Do we see KTM being a threat here?
Just depends on whether they can make the most of those new tyres. But I don't know why, and poor research, but I have a feeling that Maverick Vinales, this is a pretty good track for him. Even though he's been excelling with the KTM RC16 on faster corners this year, tracks, where he can flow. I still think Maverick will be the pick of the KTM litter again. I think the bigger questions remain over Pedro Acosta. And of course, it was surprising news, especially to us, Dave, because he didn't mention a word of it in his debriefs over the weekend and also in the test that he had arm pump surgery straight after the Spanish outing.
Yeah, I think he's mentioned arm pump once, and that was after his first race in Qatar in 2024. Since then, he's not said anything about it, which again is a very rider thing to do, to pretend that all is fine.
He mentioned it, I think, in one of the earlier races this year because he was caught on camera doing some arm movements after the race, and he was kind of caught. I remember someone asked him about that, and he said, "Oh, this is the first time I've had this since that first round. I don't usually get this," but clearly he was.
So he wasn't doing the Macarena then. He was actually just working on some sort of rehab.
He's a big 50s fan doing the hand jive. I mean, obviously he's a absolute liar because all of these riders are about injuries. They don't like to. It's a sign of weakness. They don't like to talk about it, but he has actually succumbed to the inevitable. I do think it's a bit of a. I mean, it's a shame. Because it's a sign of how demanding these motorbikes are now, with all of the aerodynamics which make them really difficult to turn. The forces which are involved, the improvement in braking systems, which makes the lap faster, but puts more and more load on on arms, shoulders, and all the rest of the body. So I think how many riders are there left on the grid that haven't had arm pump surgery now? It's got to be
Chandra as well has had surgery, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. Chandra also had arm pump surgery. I think there's maybe 4 or 5, and that's about it. It's definitely fingers of one hand.
It's a rites of passage, it seems, especially for the rookies. I mean, Ralph Fernandez, I think maybe has had it 2 or 3 times.
And we spoke about Acosta. It will be interesting to see whether that has really been a big factor for him this year. And we have spoken about him being quite disappointing. Maybe that is one of the reasons why he's been quite disappointing this year. And Le Mans has been a great track for him in years gone by. He crashed out of both his Moto2 outings there, but it was the first time he was on pole in Moto2 in 2022, and he crashed out of the lead, but it was the first time he was actually properly at the front. And last year, of course, he said he had the bike to win before he crashed out down at, was it Garage Fair? I think it was.
It was.
And it would have been really, really interesting to see whether he could have, fought with the Ducatis up the front in that one. So, historically good track for Acosta. It will be interesting to see whether he can, be up there with Maverick.
I do think that because thinking about it, the vibration issue is also going to be something which exacerbates that, because you're having to hold on to the bike more just to try to get it, to try to calm it down, to try to get it to do the thing that you want to do, because it's the rear is bouncing around all over the place. So I think that probably made his arm pump worse. So if he's got something which will give him some relief from that, we might see a bit of a rejuvenated Pedro Acosta. And again, it might also explain some of his mood.
I think also, was it Jack Miller in Jerez talking about sort of the 20 to 30 extra kilogram pressure, trying to break down the back straight into sort of dry sack or Pedrosa corner. I mean, that's also another indication of the forces that the riders are having to deal with. And I think now, if you want to get into MotoGP, like we were saying, you have to consider that, arm pump surgery is going to have to be a natural consequence. I think it's a good question, though, Dave, to know who hasn't had it. And also it'd be kind of interesting as well to maybe speak with Danny Pedrosa, who also had it several times, and Cal Crutchlow, to ask, about the long-term effects, have these guys ever felt any, they're still testing and still riding MotoGP bikes at 350k. So obviously it's not that bad, but you do wonder, later in life, is having your arms cut open and having the muscle fibers manipulated in such a way, is it going to carry any kind of after effects? But
I think motorcycle racing is so demanding that it's sort of the least of their problems. They've usually got arthritis in wrists and feet and knees and very other places from the number of crashes that everyone has. So they, even if it is a problem, they don't notice it because everything else is hurting too much.
Speaking of Cal and Le Mans, didn't he have a pretty gnarly crash there, in his final years of LCR, and then sort of missed a day and came back to try and race? I have a vague memory of that happening.
Yeah,
it was pretty
horrible
brutal.
High side, I seem to remember. Was it coming out of Garage Fair? I think it was.
Yeah, the right-hander.
Yeah. 2017 or I think it was, or 2018. I can't remember exactly the year, but yeah, it was a horrible crash. And I remember Cal's team just expressing disbelief that he was even thinking about lining up on the grid, never mind finishing.
On the subject of Honda, as we mentioned, we've been trying to get under the skin of what's going on at HRC and their sort of reversion to some half-decent form. And, we spoke with some more people in the camp in Jerez, when they unveiled their new hospitality in Spain 2 weeks ago. And here's the audio now. Okay, I'm standing in the brand new HRC hospitality here in the Jerez paddock. I'm delighted to be speaking with Harry Lloyd. Harry, welcome to the podcast briefly. It's a bit of a shindig. There's lots of VIPs. It's very busy. It looks kind of a little bit more like a disco at the moment. Everything's been cleared away and there's the booze is free flowing. First of all, sort of tell us a bit about your role with Honda and HRC, because it's changed for 2025.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Adam. As you said, I'm Harry Lloyd, and I'm the head of marketing and communications for Honda HRC. So my role is pretty diverse. Like with a lot of people in MotoGP, wear a fair few hats. So do everything from the social media to press releases to then also looking after sponsorship and partners. overseeing that, and now have built and expanded on a really good team here who are really helpful with a lot of things. And we're a small team, maybe a little bit scrappy, but I'm really proud of everything that we've been able to do, especially in the last sort of 12 months. I think that we've been able to keep pushing, and even though it maybe hasn't been the easiest time on track for Honda HRC, I think that, off track there's lots of things that we can be really proud of. So yeah, really happy to be involved with that. And then, like you say, yes, definitely the biggest impact we've had so far is this lovely new hospitality unit here in Jerez. It's pretty much all anybody's spoken to me about.
It's kind of ironic that you say that, you're a small team, because, if you look around the paddock here at the Spanish Grand Prix, all you see are HRC engineers. Maybe it's a little symbolic as well that HRC have this big new flash home, and there's so many staff, and you have like a wildcard ride in Leche Espargaro. It's just a very visual sign of the way things are at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that for a long time, people have always said that, Honda is this sleeping giant, and one day it'll wake up and it'll go full. And I think that, in the last 3-4 years, where everything has been much, much tougher than Honda has probably ever experienced before in Grand Prix racing, that, it has been a couple of years of learning and studying and seeing what's going to be the best way to come out of this situation. And now, already you saw it in 2024, but now from 2025, Honda HRC is really, I think changing how they're doing things in a lot of ways, putting a lot more resource, a lot more varied resource, not just into the bike, but like you say, with this hospitality, doing something new and showing everybody that, Honda's been here longer than anybody else. We've been very fortunate to have more success than anybody else, and everybody involved in this project, from the PR side to the engineering side to the management side, is completely devoted and completely focused on really returning to the top and bringing every aspect of the game to the top, to lead in every single metric, basically.
Is this also a way to kind of show that some of the culture or some of the attitude is also changing in Honda? Because, understandably, HRC battened down the hatches, with development going on, the results not being what it was, the whole Marc Marquez fallout. I don't think people can blame you for not wanting to broadcast yourselves too much or expose what's going on inside the company. But now that corner seems to be turned a little bit.
Yeah, I think definitely, like I said, I think from the engineering side, everybody learned a lot in the last 3-4 years, and then also, from the marketing, from the PR side, opening up and now trying to really, maybe not quite yet shout about our success. Johann got 9th today in the sprint, which it's a pretty good result, but finally HRC is here to win races, so we're not quite ready to shout about things yet, but be a bit, I guess, proud of the progress that we're making, the journey that we're making. I think from these first 4 or 5 races, one of the big takeaway stories has been, sort of the progress that we have made, and instead of just hiding and waiting until we do arrive at that final destination is shout about that a bit and share a bit that, we are coming. This is a long process. You look at how long it took Ducati to do what they're doing, Aprilia, KTM, Yamaha. It's not something that, even for us, unfortunately, is not something that's going to happen completely overnight. So, just sharing the process with everybody.
How many years have you been with HRC now?
I started in 2019, so this is my 6th year. So I've had a very interesting tenure here. Started, 2019, probably one of HRC's best ever seasons. And then it all got a bit difficult for a couple of years, and now we're definitely on the upswing, and I think the momentum will carry through and we'll keep building.
Harry, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you describe pretty much the change in HRC, from some of the tough times of Marc leaving to how we see it now?
Yeah, I mean, the change, I'd say probably overall is a 7 or so, but when you speak about the tough times, Sachsenring, what was it, 2023, with the crashes and the injury and missing the race, I'd say that was probably one of the lowest points. So if we're really going from that lower point, then I think that the turnaround is almost a 9 or a 10. Now we have 2 riders, not just also in the Honda HRC Castrol team, but also the riders in LCR and Aleix, who everybody is positive about this project, is doom and gloom that was there for a good 2-3 years, I think has started to lift, and everybody now can see that everybody in this project is pushing forward. You know, like I said, there is still work to do, but now there is progress, there's plans for the future, so it has been a very good turnaround, and it does change a lot, you know, when you come to a weekend for work, and you know you're with all of the guys and the girls and the team for a lot of the year. It really does make a difference, everybody being a bit more optimistic.
Don't panic, but I'm going to throw this one on you. You work closely with Alberto Puig. He has a reputation, he has a demeanour. Please, can you sort of describe, you know, actually what it's like collaborating with Alberto? You know, the sort of the base level when it comes to operations for HRC.
Yeah, Alberto is definitely a character. I think that everybody in the paddock, no matter your feelings on him, would think of that. But I think that certainly one thing I've learned in my time with HRC is that Alberto is probably one of the most interesting people that I've ever met and ever worked for. You know, in his life, in his career, he's done so much, from being a very successful rider to developing a lot of young talent, and now being here at the head of MotoGP's biggest team through probably one of their worst periods. Is working with Alberto is very intense. Like you say, sometimes he can be a little bit of a character, but no, it's honestly an incredible privilege to be able to work so closely with him. You know, he's somebody who really trusts the people around him. Is for lots of things, is he lets you do what you do, and he has full faith in what you do, and that's, I think, something quite rare, not just in MotoGP, but I think in a lot of workplaces, to have a boss, a manager like that who will have that faith in you to just do what you think is best for the company is something I really appreciate, and you always have a lot of funny moments as well with Alberto. I mean, I'm sure lots of your podcast fans will have heard him and Crafar over the last couple of years, sharing a few stories, shall we say, in pit lane. It's like that times 10, is like that sort of 20 hours a day. But no, it's something that honestly I wouldn't change, because I've learned so much from him and everything. So.
All right, Harry, thanks ever so much for the grilling and also for the invitation. So look forward to a media dinner in here.
Yeah, please go enjoy. There's some jamon, some cheese, there's lots of Aperol spritzers, so please go and enjoy, and don't run off, because we do have gifts for everybody. So.
Or I'm going to have to get David and Neil in here, especially when I know there's food. But
I have a couple of spares, no worries. Something for everybody.
Cheers, Harry.
Thank you, mate.
Welcome back. We're talking about the French Grand Prix at Le Mans, but we've been running a competition for our Patreons recently for 3 general admission tickets plus a tour of the paddock on Sunday for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. And we have some winners. We would like to announce that Peter Newell, Neil Cottam and Daxa have all won those tickets.
Daksha, I met her in Daksha. I met her in Spain. She's lovely, a lovely woman, a very fast super. Well, I mean, she's still learning, but she's a very fast supermoto racer. So charming.
Well, for Miriam and her Paddock Pass podcast drinking game, there's the mispronunciation. So down your shot. Guys, as we've been promoting these competitions for patrons, we have 4 different tiers that you can join up for annual subscription. You also get a discount, and there's loads of extra content on there, some special stuff. Also, is the opportunity to enter these competitions. And, we put a post up. We asked people who are interested in going to the British Grand Prix. And then, the people that replied, we had 45 people. So your chances of winning sort of, tickets which are worth £240 for 3 days, or £200 if you just want to go on Sunday, is pretty damn good. So Peter, Neil and Daksha, we hope you enjoy your trip to the British Grand Prix. And we have another one. Instead of 3 tickets, we only got 1, but this is pretty special. Dave, for the Dutch TT.
That's right. We've got a pair of paddock passes for the Dutch TT. Entries needed by the end of May. Paddock passes are great at Aston because it's a really good place to sit in to be in the paddock, because you get up on basically the pit building. You can look down into pit lane. You can see a lot of the first part of the track. It's a large, roomy paddock. Everyone is there. It's really one of the better places. There's a few places where the paddock tickets are more of a hindrance than a help almost. I mean, Aston is great, and obviously I'm biased. I mean, two paddock passes to the cathedral. What could be better?
And what deadline are we setting for this, guys? Because we're recording this on May the 6th. How long are we going to give people to join up and enter the competition?
We are going to give people until the end of May, so May the 31st, so that they can arrange. Basically, it gives people a month to arrange accommodation and travel and all the rest of it. But go to our Patreon page or find us on social media. There's a link in there to the Patreon post. I shall also pin it to the top of our profiles so that you can find it. Sign up. It's annual Paddock Insiders, which is the $10 tier, and
Experts.
And Paddock Experts. I think our Paddock VIPs are all sold out, so which we're very grateful for. But yeah, sign up and join in and get a chance to come to a great race.
If you don't get lucky with the Paddock Pass competition, then we're backed this year by Pole Position Travel. So if you still want to come to a Grand Prix and you want that behind the scenes access, the tours, the hospitality, everything, then go to polepositiontravel.com and pick out a package there. We also have a discount. So if you're going to book something, enter PPOD25X. PPOD25X, and you'll get a small saving on whatever you're looking for. The guys at the moment are heavily promoting the German and Czech Grand Prix back to back. So if you're considering visits to Brno or to Sachsenring, then have a look at Pole Position Travel and see if you can find a hotel and packages and everything you need in terms of logistics to get to those particular races. Moving on, Dave, we're going to pick your brains now because the Grand Prix Commission in MotoGP have announced that a couple of new rule changes. It seems that Marc Marquez's antics will not go, what's the word? Unpunished is not right. Uncorrected or I don't know.
Unadjusted, yeah, something like that. Yes. So basically, what has happened is the Grand Prix Commission has agreed it's more of an overhaul of the start procedure. The start procedure itself isn't changed, but all the various sort of penalties and punishments for changing tyres and everything else has been changed. We've got rid of the ride-through penalty. Before it was, do you start from the back? Do you start from the back with the ride-through? Do you start from your own position with the ride-through? There were lots of different complications as to what would happen if you if you tried to change tyres after the 3-minute mark. So basically, we're up to the 3 minutes to go sign, which they hold up at the front of the grid. You can do anything you like to your bike. Well, you can do anything you like given the time constraints. So you can swap your tires, change your suspension, and change the setup if you think the track is going to dry, or if the track is suddenly really starting, if there's a very light rain and it's starting to rain heavy, you can sort of like switch from slicks to wet tires or vice versa. After that, anything you do, like leaving the grid or not being able to start your bike, anything else, it means that you will start the warm-up lap, return to your original grid slot, and serve two long lap penalties. The objective, as I understand it, is to make it simpler, because it was clear, especially from the fantastic footage that Dorna put up of the various sort of arguments between all of the teams of, who's what and what am I got. And I mean, Marc Marquez did it thinking he would only start from the back of the grid. That was why he left.
But he was banking on everybody else running off the grid, right, Dave? And I mean, is there anything in the regulations to kind of stop that group or gang mentality?
There is nothing to stop that gang mentality, but the point is to stop or to change the calculation to running off the grid in the first place. The reason that Marc ran off the grid was because he thought all he was going to get was start from the back of the grid. Yeah, exactly. And if he's starting on the back of the grid on slicks and everyone else is on wets, he knows he will be past them in 3 laps. However, if you're starting from your own position, then you've got 2 ride-throughs. Then you've got two ride-throughs to go. I think it's less likely that you're going to get a mass of people all going off. But again, the point is, make the rules a lot simpler and clearer so that everyone understands them. Basically, it's either start from where you are or start from your position and do a double long lap, or come in at the end of the warm-up lap, swap bikes, and then start from pit lane. And if you start from pit lane, another good change that they made, small one, was that they've now banned the use of launch control from pit lane exit as well, which I think makes it better. It makes it a little bit safer.
I mean, part of the mess in the USA was due to the fact that the IRTA and the FIM race control didn't want a mass start from pit lane because of the dangers of it, and also not just the start, but the amount of activity that was going on with the amount of people. It was a highly unusual situation. So, but it's good that the rules have been kind of tweaked to at least force the mentality of the, not the riders necessarily, but also the teams, briefing them to say, listen, if you leave the grid, then you've got to go through that long lap section twice.
That's the point. The point is, like, so everybody should know the rule. You've got no excuse for knowing the rules now. Whereas before it was like, hang on, wait a minute. If it's a Wednesday and the moon is in Sagittarius, then I get a double long lap penalty unless my bike is white, in which case it's a double long lap penalty and a ride through.
I mean, the fact that they're reacting and changing the rules, that's got to be a positive thing, right, guys? Because I mean, sadly, motorcycle racing and hazards involved, have been thrown to the forefront, this week, after the very sad incident for BSB at Alton Park, saw the loss of life for sort of Owen Jenner and Shane Richardson. Of course, thoughts for everybody connected with those riders, their families, their teams. I mean, horrible scenes, but, particularly with the British Grand Prix around the corner as well, it's something you hate to see, of course, but it's something that's prominent in the sport, and as much as people try to tuck it to the back of your mind, it can happen. And I think it is a positive thing, both of all the parties in control of MotoGP, that they are putting safety to the forefront. And what happened at the Circuit of the Americas was because of that, not because of some devious manipulation of the intricacies of the rulebook.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is the tragic crash in BSB was also, it happened at the start. And the start is always the most dangerous part of any race, because you've got all of the bikes all sort of bunched together. So many of the really dangerous things that we've seen in MotoGP have been at the start. Pecco Bagnaia, for example, Marco Simoncelli, Bagnia's incident at Barcelona when he crashed in turn 2. All of those bikes there, it's always a miracle that nobody does get hurt. It's another reason why the race direction don't like calling restarts, because even though there might be what looks like a dangerous situation on track, a restart can be so much more dangerous. You've got all of the bikes together, so it's one of those horrible choices that you have to make. And if you crash, the greatest danger in modern motorcycle racing is being hit by another bike. We've made enormous leaps in safety. Being hit by another bike is the biggest threat, and the biggest chance you have of being hit by another bike is when you crash in front of in front of a whole lot of other bikes, which we saw with Jorge Martin again at Qatar, where he crashed in front of Digia, and Digia just basically had nowhere to go, and he clipped him. And I think Martin came away from there quite well.
Well, it's been the cause of most of the recent fatalities, collisions, especially from following riders, Dave. So it's a valid point. On a more light-hearted note, Neil, are you interested to see that one of the rule changes, as the most follically blessed amongst the three of us, include riders tidying up their hair?
Yeah, competition isn't seriously fierce in that field amongst the Paddock podcast lot, I have to say. Yeah, that was an interesting one. I have asked to understand what was going on. Riders must be in charge of their own hair. Make sure that it's not flopping down in front of their eyes at all times. There's not too many riders with massive afros or long fringes that I can think of. Darren Binder used to wear a rugby cap, I think, inside his helmet, but I think even he's found a pair of scissors recently. Also, another tweak that was interesting is that if a rider has been out injured and has missed 3 consecutive races or 45 days of action due to injury, then he'll be allowed to test his MotoGP machine over 1 day before making his return. And I guess this is kind of in reference to the situation that Jorge Martin found himself in after missing all of preseason and the first couple of races, having to throw himself back into the action in Qatar. Maybe his reaction would have been slightly different if he had a full day of testing with the MotoGP machine before he did that. So yeah, that is another fairly consequential change that has been added this week.
While I'm quite sympathetic to the case, the point is that it's only factory riders who are going to get to do this. If you're on a satellite bikes can't afford to, they just cannot afford the cost, which is, I don't know, it's probably going to cost them 20, 30, 40 grand to get the bikes, to get the team, to get everyone at a track, rent a track, find a track at which you can ride a MotoGP bike and take a rider testing. It's an extremely expensive hobby. It's an extremely expensive activity. Factories have that sort of already factored in.
Yeah, but Dave, if you're investing 7 or 8 million in a rider like Jorge Martin, I get your point. It's for satellite riders, but then I mean, they could. There's also other like small parts of the rules, like they can only use 3 sets of tires, so they're only going to get a certain amount of track time with that. I mean, surely it's worth the investment.
Yeah, but I mean, quite often at track, off the top of my head, so I would need to check, what riders usually get is, so for example, if I remember correctly, the Sepang test, they had 10 sets of tyres for 3 days, which was basically what, 332 or something, or maybe it was 8, but they had like 3 sets of tyres for 1 day and 2 sets of tyres for the other day, plus some test tyres. But yeah, you don't get a lot of tyres at on a test day anyway, so they're not getting a great deal of tyres. So yeah, I mean, like, I understand that manufacturers want to do this because factories do put a lot of money into it. But again, it's another one of those things which just gives the factories a small edge over the satellite teams. But then again, it's not going to happen that often. As it happens, we have 2 riders who have missed a lot of action this year with Miguel Oliveira and Jorge Martin. But generally, it very, very rarely happens.
Henceforth known as the Jorge Martin rule. It'll be very interesting to see which rider sort of first takes it up, or which manufacturer first puts it into play.
Jorge Martin, because he's already missed Jerez, is missing Le Mans. Is he going to be back in time for Silverstone? Who knows? Probably better to wait until Aragon.
But is it going to be 45 days? You'd think so.
It's going to be 3. It'll be 3 consecutive events. So it's either 3 consecutive events or 45 days from the start of the season to the end of the season, which is basically there to cover. If we have, for example, an extended summer break, we've had a couple of years where we've had like 5-week summer breaks, and there's just no way you're going to get 3 consecutive events in there. So yeah, but if Martin missed, he's already missed, as I say, Jerez, he's going to miss Le Mans. If he misses Silverstone, he will have missed 3 consecutive events, and so he'd be entitled to a test.
In the last sort of pocket of this show, we wanted to talk about some of the riders not necessarily under threat for 2026 and sort of the last year of the current era of MotoGP, but mainly because the season's, coming up to, well, it's the first sort of quarter, first corner is in the bag, in the record books. And there's only a couple of riders, Dave. I mean, you put together quite a concise list who have to be, engaging their managers or representatives to be talking or engaging in contract talks. Is it fair to say that Johann Zarco is probably the most interesting one at the moment?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say that Johann Zarco is the rider who is absolutely safest, because he's doing an absolutely fantastic job. I think technically, although I think he also said that he actually has a contract for next year as well. But that's probably a 1+1. But formally, when his contract was announced, it was only for this year. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him, because if he doesn't, HRC need to give him a contract to stay where he is, or move up into the factory team. But he's got to be a top target for someone if someone has a vacancy.
Neil, who's on the chopping block?
The other riders that are out of contract at the end of this year, Luca Marini, as filled with wisdom as he is, has he done enough on track to say that he's warranting a place in Honda's factory team? I'm not sure he is. Somkiat Chandra, I think, has a 1-year deal with LCR, and you could certainly say that he isn't kind of up to MotoGP level at the moment. I think he needs to start posting some pretty significant improvements in the next couple of weeks to guarantee a spot for him next year. And then that leaves, remind me, Dave, the other one is
Jack Miller.
Jack Miller, of course, yeah. And Miller's going to be quite an interesting one as well. He's been quite impressive, actually, a lot more so than his teammates, who's on a 2-year deal. Rumours about Toprak coming into MotoGP, I think it's really, really far-fetched that he's going to go into Pramac Yamaha next year in MotoGP. It looks as though maybe a spot in Honda World Superbike might be a little more likely.
I disagree. He's going to Pramac Yamaha next year.
Oh wow! Is that interesting? You put in some money on that, Dave, or?
I will put 5 pence on that. It's 5 whole English pennies. No, I mean, there is talk about the
what's the point of going in with 1 year of Michelin's left? It doesn't make any sense.
I know it doesn't make any sense, but it means that he's in MotoGP and you sign him to, you make sure that you get a 2 or a 3 year contract. I mean, if it was me, I'd be looking at 2027. But he turns 30, I think, next year. There's very little more for him to do. I mean, I watched the World Superbike racing this weekend, and it was mostly a waste of time. I did, yeah. The World Supersport races were absolute crackers. I highly recommend those. But basically, the World Superbike races at Cremona, at that particular layout, it was Nicola Bulliger and Toprak Razgatlioglu, and then 10 seconds Alvaro Bautista, and then 10 seconds and the rest. The battle for fourth was fantastic, but the battle up front, it was basically Bulliger versus Toprak, and Toprak was clearly on an inferior bike and struggling to keep up and pulling off some amazing moves to actually sort of stay in front of
Dave,
Bulliger.
What Neil says makes sense. I mean, it doesn't make much sense. And also, if you're Paolo Pavezio pulling the strings at Yamaha, wouldn't it be costly and a little bit more, I don't know, profitable to invest in someone like Manu Gonzalez from Moto2? Rather than
what you forget is that Paolo Pavezio knows Toprak Razgatlioglu extremely well, because Paolo Pavezio was the head of Yamaha Motor Europe before he became head of Yamaha Motor Racing. He has an excellent relationship with Toprak. He knows him very well. He really rates him as well, from what I understand. So yeah, I mean, I think that Paolo, and the other thing is, it's a chance to get him back. It's a chance to bring him back into the Yamaha family. You know that Yamaha is that Toprak is going to be a superstar no matter what, even if he doesn't perform particularly well. If you think about Jack Miller has had sort of up years and down years, but he's extremely well loved. He's extremely well liked. He's a fantastic marketing tool. He has sort of like really strong marketing ties with his own personal brands. Some unusual ones, like Cat, for example. The
Caterpillar,
yeah, exactly. Who else has got a bloody digger contract sort of thing. There's very few people who have those sort of strong sponsorships. Toprak can do that. Toprak can bring that kind of attention. It'd be very good for the for the Turkish market. So yeah, and as I said, Ivo Schutzbach of Speed Week was sort of investigating this all through the weekend, which I'm sure you'll hear more about when Steve and Gordo and Ivo sit down for the World Superbike pod later this week. And Honda have said, no, we haven't even mentioned him. We haven't talked to Toprak at all. We're not going to be offering him that sort of thing. And Kenan Sofuoglu is one of the absolute best managers in the World Superbike paddock, and he knows exactly how to squeeze as much value as possible out of everyone. So if I was Kenan Sofuoglu, what I would be telling everyone is, yeah. No, Toprak has he's got an offer from Honda to do 1 year in Superbikes and 1 year in MotoGP, and he's definitely going in MotoGP because that winds everyone else up and forces them into action.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement and entertainment factor, I don't think there's any discussion. And I think we'd rather see Toprak in MotoGP compared to, say, another Spaniard or another Italian filtering up for Moto2. But just to revert back to what Neil was saying, I mean, Somkhat Chantra, I think your point is entirely valid, Neil. But I mean, his place in MotoGP, his signature is not just a slight speculation by Honda. It's also I don't want to say political maneuvering, but it's also a placement that satisfies an agenda and also sponsorship. I mean, the only other conceivable entry you could see or swap there would be for someone like Ayagura. And of all the 2-year contracts on the grid, what we don't know are the kind of 1+1 arrangements or the performance scales. To pick a name, someone like Ralph Fernandez might only get another year on his contracts if he finishes top 15, say. I mean, if he has an absolute stinker of a season, then, maybe Aprilia have some sort of means by which they can cancel the contract. I mean, I don't know if those things are actually in place, but you'd have to imagine they are, because it's a sizable investment, of course, taking a rider to MotoGP for a year. And if the fit is not happening at the form, if there's something personal going on with the riders, then both parties need to be in a position where they can end the agreement or absolve the kind of the arrangement. Listen, guys, let's finish off the podcast this week with our predictions for the French GP. Where are we going to put, well, Dave, your case? I mean, maybe you can stretch to 10 pence instead of the 5 pence. Where would you put your thrifty coin?
It is hard to see past Marc Marquez. I mean, you'd have to think that the Marquez brothers are going to be on the podium.
Are you just going to bet him every race of this year?
Yes,
okay,
because it's 2019 again. I mean, what I find much more interesting is where Zarco and Quartararo finished, because I think both of those finished top 5. That to me is a much more interesting and exciting prospect.
Neil?
I'm finding it really difficult to look beyond Mark and Alex, which I know is really quite dull. But let's say, for variety's sake, that we might have Quartararo on the podium in 3rd, and maybe we'll have someone. I mean, Mark's going to win, but who's going to be 2nd? I think it's going to be a Ducati that isn't Bagnaia. So maybe let's plump for Digia. Let's go for Digia.
Yeah, I quite like Digia. I bet on him for a podium presence. And I'll also throw a KTM in for podium contention. Let's try and have a close race. Top 5 to be undecided until the final laps. There we go. And don't expect much from the sprint, I think, is pretty much the rule of thumb. It seems to be in 2025 MotoGP.
Yeah, but the sprint, I mean, like the sprint last year wasn't bad. It was pretty decent. It's just that, like the race on Sunday was an absolute barnstormer.
Yeah, true. Now, were you ready for your first dip into McDonald's this season?
It's not going to happen, Ed. It's not going to happen. Already did it once in Sevilla during that enforced delay. So yeah, it's not going to happen 2 races in a row.
Oh right, well that was sneaky. You didn't mention that. Goodness, right? Okay, yeah, the McDonald's run coming up, and it's going to be some sort of kebab shop to get the late night podcast duties underway. And thanks to Renthal, to Pole Position Travel, and to all our patrons. Congratulations to our competition winners for the British Grand Prix. We will be in touch. Other than that, we'll be back with our Paddock Note Show, the first of our daily roundups from Thursday at Le Mans. Thanks for listening.